Welcome to Ignite Intimacy, a podcast exploring intimacy, romantic relationships, sexuality, and the all of everything that relates to these hot topics. We're going in. You ready? This is your host, Miss La. Let's do this.
Hey, Ignite Intimacy community. This is Dr. Saida Desley, and I am so excited to tell you about my upcoming Dare Live event in LA, California at the end of September. That's this month. Now, I'm curious. Are you ready to live life on your own terms? Would you love to be more audaciously you? Perhaps you desire to live a more fulfilling life through embodying your sensuality. When you say yes to Dare Live, you're taking a step towards claiming your vitality, your sensuality, and stepping into your full power to dare even further into yourself. Plus, coming to a live event gives you the opportunity to be surrounded by awesome sisters who see you as powerful, ask questions face to face, and learn practices that are impossible for me to teach through a video. So join me and my ambassadors this September 29th to October 1st at a beautiful private studio in Los Angeles for Dare Live. And we'll see you at the event.
Lola!
Yes.
What is going on?
Oh, what isn't going on? I just got back home.
Yes. Tell us about your trip. You were out on an adventure out on the West Coast.
Yes. It was a mini West Coast tour. Call it mini because it was only California. I was in San Francisco, Sacramento, and LA. Mm-hmm. I did my show Sex at a Go-Go in both San Francisco and LA. And then I did a private event, like a birthday party thing, while I was in Sacramento. And mixed into that was also a conference and a teaching gig and seeing friends. So it was very much an adventure.
Very cool. And you also attended at least one conference too, right?
Yeah, that was Catalyst Con.
Nice.
Yeah.
And that's where I think I learned about you last year. I was in Los Angeles and I happened upon Catalyst Con and met some really amazing people. And I don't remember if we actually met or if I just picked up a flyer and your name was on it and somehow we got connected through that.
Probably. I was flitting around a lot last year.
That's awesome. Well, tell our audience a little bit about Catalyst Con, because I know you've gone every year for the last couple of years.
Pretty much, yeah. Catalyst Con is a sex positivity conference that is all about sparking conversations across different platforms, whether that be different areas of sex ed, different expertise areas. It's anywhere from therapists, sex workers, sex shop workers, everybody. It's anybody, if you have your fingers in the world of sex or sex ed, it's a great place to come because it tries to make us mingle and commingle. I think a lot of what people do is we tend to focus on what our areas are. Mm-hmm. Especially when it comes to learning or different conferences, we'll go to the thing that's all about what we already do. And I like Catalyst because there are tracks. So if you do want to go and you really want to focus on things I'm very performance based, so I tend to gravitate towards things about public speaking or using performance as a platform for social justice, things like that I like to go to. But then there's lots of different talks about trans folks and their experience in different parts of sex and sex ed and social justice. And there'll be things about self-esteem and there'll be things about being sex positive and raising your children in a sex positive way. And even though I don't have kids, so there's all these different conversations being had. And some people might look at it and go, oh, that just seems like it's really scattered. But really what Dennis, she's the founder of Catalyst Con, is trying to do is to get people to get out of their comfort zone and get into something else, learn about something new. And the best way to do that is just to have everything all together.
Yes.
So that's Catalyst Con in a nutshell.
Cool. And it looks like you did Sex a Go-Go with another podcast guest that we had a while ago, Dr. Liz Powell.
Yes. I love Dr.
Sweet. Oh, yeah. She's awesome. Okay, so we
we connected to have this conversation with a really specific focus in mind, right? Like, we're not blind to the fact that racism is alive and well in America and in the world, right? And that we really live in a society that was built on a foundation of white supremacy, and which has, evolved over the last several hundred years. And so I had seen a Facebook Live that you had posted, I don't know, early September or like late August, and had reached out and said, let's talk about this, because we haven't talked about this on the podcast yet. And it's something that it is necessary to to shine more light on this topic and the Black Lives Matter movement and diversity as it relates to sex and sexuality and the sex industry and all of that.
Ooh, okay. Oh, it's this thing where I guess for me to be asked the question is not that it's a silly question. And then I realized I haven't thought about it because it's always just been this important thing that's needed. Going to conferences, it's very easy to look around and realize that we're in an industry that is very white. And let me rephrase that. I say it's very white, but then you realize that it's not that it's very white. It's that these spaces are very white, because there are lots of POC doing really great work who don't feel comfortable going to conferences, don't have access to them because the prices can be astronomical, or are just tired of showing up and being the token Black person, so they just don't go to these things anymore, or they don't know about them because for whatever reason they're not being marketed in a way that it's reaching POC unless you're like directly invited or somebody tells you about it. So I think more so with the Black Lives Matter movement being really out there, it's gotten more and more people to really say, like, we can't do this anymore. Like, I'm tired of hoping things will get better. I need to make things better, but also I need other people, white people, especially in our industry, to realize what's going on, realize the damage that they're doing, and do better. And I know certain parts of sex ed and sexuality, there are, especially like in the therapist areas, there's been a lot of, I don't know the right word to use, just a lot of issues with people not thinking that more needs to be done, or almost doing things in a way as it'll make them happy. Not like, oh yeah, we need to do better, we need to do work, but like, oh, this will make those people stop talking about it so much. And I feel that means even more so we need more allies and accomplices in this to say, like, hey, that's the wrong way to be approaching this. That's the wrong way to be looking at POC in our industry, period. So that's where that's really come up for me. That movement has just given me more insight into how to approach people and how to approach going into these conferences and asking for more and asking for things to do better. And Catalyst has been a place where, from when I started attending to now, there's definitely been an uptick in the amount of POC who attend. Dee has actually really listened to a lot of what folks have been saying. This year, I left feeling really enriched and really empowered to keep going and making it better. Because one, we had a POC meetup. It was the first year for that. And being able to see everybody in a room and realize how many folks were there, it felt really good. One, because sometimes it's hard at a conference to really see everyone because you're not going to see everybody in a room or whatever's happening. So to be in a room with everyone and to know that there were still people who weren't able to attend the meetup that weren't there. And it was like, oh, there were a lot of people, and that's great. And so how do we keep this circle growing? And that it felt like a lot of people had good things to say, and that there was still people saying, well, we can do better, which we can. There needs to be more of us. We need to think of ways to get more folks here. We need to find ways to make it more accessible, but it was still like a really good vibe.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And I want more of that.
Are there any predominantly people of color, persons of color conferences or events that you're aware of in the sex and sexuality space?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
So I've not been to either one of these conferences yet, but I've had heard so many amazing things from my friends who are, the people of color that are my direct friends that I have like direct bonds and friendships with about Polydallas Millennium.
Okay.
Or PDM. I think that this year was their third conference. I'm not sure what number they're up to. Maybe they might be more than 3. But so many people without prompting, like I was just watching my Facebook feed, and the feedback just from folks about their experience and that there were so many people of color there made me want to attend and be a part of that energy. And the types of talks that were being submitted because so many people of color were in attendance and speaking. And Sex Down South, which wasn't able to happen this year because they had issues with getting a space to throw the conference.
Okay.
I was really bummed that they were not doing that this year, but that's another conference that has a lot of POC that's predominantly POC. That's definitely something I want to go. I was actually trying to speak there, but because they had to cancel it until next year, until 2018, that'll have to wait. But those are 2 that I know are really big POC spaces.
And what was the second conference that you mentioned?
Sex Down South.
Sex Down
That happens
South.
in Atlanta. Yeah. Right. And Polydallas is, of course, in Dallas.
Okay, cool.
And yeah, it's just, I think it when you look at the people who run it are women of color. There are 2 women, a woman of color in charge of each one of those conferences. And I think that has a lot to do with the outreach and where things get posted as far as looking for speakers and where things get posted as far as looking for folks to attend. And so then it turns into, of course, this is predominantly a POC space because look who's running it. And I think that is a big clue to other conferences when it's like, who's on your board? Who's helping you? Who's helping? Like, if you don't have POC in the founder space, but who's helping you put things together? Who is advising you? Who's helping you create spaces and events within your event? And if you look around and you don't have POC on your staff, then, and not just like helper staff, but like advisors, people who are helping you make decisions, then I think that is a big like red flag.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Can I share a post that you put on your Facebook page?
Oh yeah,
okay.
Of course.
So you said when communities say they're inclusive, but they create promotional videos that literally show they don't know what that word means. If you can't find people of color and folks with varying body types for your advertisements, then I'm not going to believe for 1 second that your space is welcoming to my fat black self. Nope. So this is like it's like, duh. I mean, it's like if you're saying you're inclusive and you're saying you're diverse, but you're not including different body sizes, different, people varying cultures and ethnicities and skin colors in your marketing materials, videos, whatever that may be. It's like, how can you call yourself diverse and inclusive? Like what?
Right.
Yeah. What would make, someone with a person of color or a bigger person, or, if you're not including trans in your marketing materials, what would make those people feel like they're going to be welcomed and safe in your environment?
Exactly. And some things like sexuality and also even like trans, that doesn't always translate in print materials.
Sure.
But so like those are things where it's like, you have to find other ways to make sure people know. And it's more than just writing, this is a safe space. Like I've gone to events where they provided locker space for folks who might need to change into whatever. Like if maybe you're transitioning, but you're not there yet out in the open, but you want to be out at whatever party, they're providing space to keep your things.
That's
like
awesome.
If you don't want to walk from your home. And I'm like, that's a way to show that you are welcoming to people. That's really concrete. That's more than just saying this is a safe space.
Yeah.
And just having varied people models on your print materials. It's I know a lot of like in New York especially, we have a lot of like communities that are throwing events, and they've gone from these little indie events to these huge things where they're very well known. And so I know they use a lot of people that attend their events as part of their print materials. And like the particular group I was talking about who made a promotional video, I know they use people who attend their events to create this video, because you're not going to pay for a bunch of models. You're going to dig into your community and say, like, who wants to be a part of this? And I'm like, you're showing me that you don't have people of color, or that, I mean, literally, I watched it over 10 times and couldn't find more. I think I found like 2 people of color, like in a background somewhere. And I'm still not sure if it was a person of color or if it was shadows, or just even people of different abilities. And I know the space, and I know that it's not accessible. So how can you say you're inclusive when you have stairs and you have nowhere way for a person with a wheelchair to get in and out of your space?
Yeah.
You know, it's throwing that word out there when you're not at all inclusive. You can't be totally inclusive if someone in a wheelchair or someone on crutches or anything can't get in and out of your space safely. But yeah, it's like, and it's so simple. It's like such a simple thing. One, it's people go, how do we get people of color to come to our parties? I'm like, when you make a flyer, stop putting a white girl on it.
Exactly.
If you want like POC to show up, then you need to put POC on your flyers. You need to put people of size on your flyers. You need to change it up. There's so many things you can do to say, hey, this is who we're welcoming. You're part of we're trying to get you to come to our parties. And if your thinking is that doing that is going to get who you already have to not come, then you have to think about the kind of space you've created and the kind of people that you've allowed to become a part of your community. And are you happy that you have people who would stop coming to your party if you publicize using people of size or people of color? Yeah. So I think there's a lot of that, and people aren't willing to make those hard decisions or have those deep thoughts because they're thinking about money and they're thinking about status as far as how people look and things, and they're not, and they want to use inclusivity as a buzzword so people feel good when they come to their parties without really having to look around and realize, like, yeah, most of the people in this room are white. Yeah.
And what are you seeing in the sex education space?
In the sex education spaces, it's mostly, for me, because I'm mostly traveling around to conferences. I don't do a ton of shops and things. Okay. And I have done like expos. So it's kind of that same idea. The expos I've been to, very white. There was a change slightly where they started getting more people of color, and that's kind of gone downhill. One of them where I've noticed that it's starting to become very white again, because I guess nobody's busting their balls about it. And then, yeah. And as far as like shops and things, usually shops don't publicize with like photos of people. They usually do some other kind of graphic or whatnot. So, and those tend to be mixed depending on the neighborhood that it's in, but it can still be very white sometimes. And I think it all comes down to marketing and like where you're putting your print materials, what magazines are you going after to put your ads in if you're doing that. Stock photo. I had a whole conversation about stock photos and how people admit like there aren't a lot of stock photos of POC or people of different abilities. And there are some sites that are POC specific that have popped up to try to help with that. But there's not a ton, and people need different things. And it also is a cost issue of people who want to create these things. Also, it's like the amount of money you'd need to do it, or the people are like, well, I need something really cheap. Like a lot of people in our industry don't have a lot of money. There's a lot of us on that under that bottom line who are broke and doing very DIY. So they can't afford to buy licensing for every photo they want to use. They do need to have free stock photos. So it's like, how do we create diversity and inclusivity in these things while making sure that people who are doing the work to create these things get paid, but also that these things are accessible? And I don't have an easy answer, but it's like something I'm working on within myself and talking to people. It's like, make better choices, even if it's like one better choice over like, if maybe you can't do it for every project, but if you do it for 2 out of your 5 things that you need stock photos from, if you put a little more effort or money, or I have photographer friends who've already started taking photos and now they're like, well, now what do we do with them? How do we get these out there so people can use them?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, and so what I'm realizing just in my own journey, I am like sort of diving heart first, really into educating myself about white privilege and white supremacy and this space. And even though I've had what I feel is a very diverse community for the last 25 years in my life, there are so many blind spots that I have had and that I have. So there's a lot that I'm just like, it's like, duh, like I have been so like caught up in my whiteness or like not even understanding how I benefit from being white. Like it's not even something that I think about, right? Like what a luxury,
Right.
What a fucking luxury to walk around and not even think about it, right? When like my
Right.
friends and family and colleagues of color think about it every second of every day. And not only for them, but for their families and their communities. And so it's like, first, like educating ourselves, right? Like going in, educating ourselves on like, what does this mean? If we're talking about diversity and inclusion, let's be about it. So I'm talking to all my white people out there, you know, like let's do the freaking work and start to learn about this stuff. I'm listening to a great series on a podcast series called Seen on Radio. They have a whole series called Seeing White, and it gives you play by play how whiteness became even a thing. And like when they even started referring to like white people as Caucasian and, you know, I mean, it's very eye-opening, and I'm like embarrassed to admit, but I'm going to admit it because I am putting myself at cause because I am a stand for equality in the world. And as uncomfortable as I felt at times, it doesn't matter. This is necessary for us as a global human community to move forward and to at some point have an opportunity to unify, right? So it's like all the white people out there, like educate yourselves, okay? Take a course, listen to Seen on Radio or some other informative podcast or show or read. I've started reading Audre Lorde, who I never read before. Honestly, I never even knew she existed until recently. And so it's like, you know, the more that I educate myself, the more that white people can educate themselves, the more that we can understand how we are perpetuating a lack of inclusion and a lack of diversity just because of our own ignorance, right? But we don't know what we don't know until we know it. So the way to know it is to have conversations, to educate yourself. The internet is a phenomenal tool. We walk around with computers in our hands all day long. And so, you know, that's just like something from a white woman's perspective. It's like, you know, I'm having like these like duh moments where it's like, geez, Louise, like, God, I didn't ever even see it that way, you know, or whatever it is.
Yeah. And that's totally like my main thing is, one of my main things is I also have a lot of privilege. I have a lot of light skin privilege. A lot of people don't understand colorism. It's like I don't have to deal with the same things that people with darker skin tones have to deal with. I tend to be a lot more approachable to a lot of people. I know a lot of the opportunities I'm given is because I am light and approachable. And though people may not think that that's why they're doing it, it's why they're doing it. It's and so I find myself being in a space of having a lot more bandwidth, which is why I do a lot of this talking about stuff and offering people those thoughts and those videos and doing podcasts and things like this, because I have the bandwidth to do so. But I also like to let people know, like, it's not to not expect it. Like, this isn't my place to teach you anything. Mm-hmm. I am being helpful because I have the bandwidth, not because I feel I need to do it, not because it's my responsibility. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a big thing, is people don't equate like, well, how will I know? And I'm like, that's lazy.
Totally.
That's really lazy. It's like, how will you know Spanish? Do you go find a Spanish person and make them teach you? No. You like figure out where you can get a course, somebody who speaks Spanish, or you go like buy Rosetta Stone or something like that.
Find an app or like, yeah, whatever.
Right. You don't just expect
Google
someone
Translate.
who speaks another language. Right. You don't just walk around expecting people who speak other languages to just teach you everything. And that's, I try to like use that example when we're talking about things that happen with race. It's you're expecting people to sit and give you all this energy. And the problem and the thing that I don't think people get is that with all of this energy and all of this explaining, because it is so heavy, a lot of people will be like, well, I don't believe that, or that can't be how it is. And it's like, you're expecting all of this from me. I'm giving it to you. And then you're going to like double down and tell me you don't believe my lived experience, or that's not how it is. Or my favorite, I have a Black friend and they said that's not what it's like for them. And it's like, it's not like that for all people. I haven't had the same experiences as a lot of Black folks. But here's the thing. I believe what Black folks say because I know that it's plausible. I know that it happens. I don't need it to happen to me to know that there's discrimination because your name sounds quote unquote too Black, or because you're really dark skinned, or I don't need someone to think I'm a thief because I'm wearing a hoodie on a dark street and cross the street. I don't need that to happen to me to know that it happens. And that's what I try to get into people's heads is a lot of these things haven't happened to me, but I know they happen. I know they happen because I have so many people in my life that it happens to. I may not go through the same type of discrimination, but I have had discrimination happen to me. So if these little things happen to me, I know these much bigger things are happening to other people. And that's a big part of it too. It's not just teaching yourself; it's opening your heart and having empathy and realizing that a whole bunch of things may not have happened to you, and you may not understand it fully because they haven't happened to you. But that by you saying I don't believe it or that can't be what it is, you're discounting millions of people's lived experience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember I had a dear friend. She passed way too young from brain complications due to a brain tumor. But my dear friend, Mystic Fiddler, who I knew here in New York City, and I remember years ago she talked to me about how, sometimes she's walking down the street and people will clearly move to the other side of the street when they see her and getting followed around the grocery store and, whatever the case is. And it's just like, fuck, man, like, wow, that's real. Like and it's not real for one person. That's real for like 1 billion people or more on this planet. It's like, that's real for, half of the world, right?
Right.
It's like billions of people experience racism based on the color of their skin every day. And some form of bias and judgment. So it's important to bring this up because, I've been to some women's leadership conferences with like really great people and like, totally like talking about, maybe not diversity, but, inclusion and really wanting to support all women. And it's like, there's like 3 women of color in an audience of 400.
Right.
And why is that? Why are you not engaging more with women of color or including women of color in your marketing materials or
having them help you plan
exactly
and or head up a part of it and not just be on staff.
Or vend, share their products and services at the actual event or, it's like there's a lot of room. There's so much room for us to really be about this in the world today. And it starts with just noticing where you're not about it, Right. So this is a powerful conversation. I'm just grateful, Lola, that you are, open to coming on and chatting with us about it because it's something I'm committed to is, mining my own gaps, right? Like where are the gaps in my own life? Where do I see the gaps within the communities that I traverse? And then really being that stand for equality and unity. But we can't get there until we start to see our own blind spots and wake up to the fact that like we've been living in a freaking bubble. And, how do we get through that so that we can really create more empathy, more connection, and ultimately more peace and community in our world?
Right. And I think the point you made in the beginning of this was you sat with being uncomfortable. And I think that is a huge learning point for people to realize you're not doing anything until you feel uncomfortable. That until you feel this twinge of why is it like this, or like, wait, what have I been participating in and not realizing I've been participating in it, or like very much so. I go back to silly things like, it's not really silly, but when The Wiz, they did a live version of The Wiz on TV 2 years ago, maybe last year, 2 years ago, and on Twitter there were so many people going, how is this right? We talk about equality, but we have an all-black version of a show. You would be so angry if there was an all-white version of The Wiz. And like, I remember somebody typing back and going, it's called The Wizard of Oz. And it's because how ignorant people are. And it's how when people are faced with being excluded in a way, when they look at something and don't see themselves represented, white people can't handle it. They get very angry and they get to the like, well, this is inequality. And it's like, no, you've had hundreds of years of being the default. You need to deal with not being the default. When you can handle seeing show after show after show that's pretty much almost an all-black cast or majority black cast, when you can go to the movies and see mostly black faces on the marquees and the posters, when you can go to a conference and be one of 4 white people in a room full of black people, when you can do that and sit with it, then you'll know what it's like to be othered. Then you'll know what it's like to be a POC or somebody differently abled, or even a person of size, or any of our LGBTQ folk, to go to a space and not be the default, to be the other. And it's an experience. If you can get that for yourself, you'll know like just a little bit of what people have lived with their entire lives. Like those feelings people get when they see an all-black cast of The Wiz, that I'm like, I want to just tell them that ball of rage you feel is something I've lived with my entire life. And have had to try to smooth out and not implode from it. And you can't even handle one TV show. How could you handle a life like this? And do you now see? And people don't take it and learn from it. And that's all I want people to get. I want people to realize sometimes you're not going to be the default. That needs to happen. There needs to be more moments where white isn't the default, where white, cis, able-bodied isn't the default.
Exactly. Well, yeah, absolutely. 100%. And I just have to say that, like, I had some stuff come up. I'm working on a project with a couple of amazing women, powerful women, a white woman and a woman of color, and myself are creating this project here in the New York City area. And, oh man, my shit came up to the surface, and I was like, I lost all sense of power. I was totally in like taking it personally. I was in my shit around it, you know, and I carried this supremely uncomfortable feeling that was all over my body. And it stemmed from my heart. And it was like throughout the night. And I talked with someone at a party that I went to last night in depth about this. And he really helped me to get an even broader perspective about, you know, my reaction to it, my own grief and tears around it, and the experience of the other. And I woke up this morning still feeling uncomfortable, like still feeling not feeling. And that's good. That's me knowing that I'm in it. You know, and like, and, you know, like KRS One says, you know, like, not only that, I'm in it to win it. Like I'm going in and I'm cracking myself wide open, as deeply uncomfortable as it is, because I want to know. I want to understand, and I want to, and ultimately my commitment is to be part of the thing that can create, you know, more empathy, deeper connections, and more unifying energy in our communities. And, you know, I had an experience when I was 16 where I left home at 16, got into a whole bunch of trouble. I was arrested a couple of times, and I was in a couple of different juvenile detention centers. And then ultimately I ended up in Louisiana for 10 months. And for about 2 or 3 months, we went to the local high school, and it was a predominantly black high school. So I was one of maybe 10 kids of white kids in the high school. And it just gave me just a little snippet into the world of what it's like to be the minority. Mm-hmm. And let me tell you what, it was terrifying every day. And then the one thing that started to create some sense of connection with some of the kids of color that I was around is I remember one day I was sitting in science class and these two kids behind me, a boy and a girl, they started singing a Steel Pulse song. And Steel Pulse is the first reggae music that I was exposed to when I was about 12. And I knew the song. And I turned around and I started singing the song with them. And they were just so blown away that I knew this song. And it was like that became our point of connection was music, right? And then that created an opening for us to start to have a dialogue. And then all of a sudden there was like this sense of connection, right? Like I'm not just here all alone. And it was life-changing for me to have that experience. But I know, I would say probably most white people will never know what it's like to be, one of only a few whites, unless they're really, really proactive and choose to insert themselves into that type of an environment.
Right. Yes. And I love that. And I love that you can look at that and not like walk away from that and go, oh, like it was horrible. Like you're like, no, I got a taste of what it was like. And then I found a way to connect. And I think that's where we are. I think that it is about us finding ways to connect, but it's also realizing that you can't connect if you don't get people into your spaces. Mm-hmm. And the good, good intent can only go so far. So saying you want that, saying that, of course you would like that, is totally different from doing it. And I've gotten to a point where I am very action oriented, because I need that. I need more of that from people. We've entered an era of, safety pins and, memes and profile pic overlays. And it's a lot of showmanship when it comes to being an ally and supporting. And though those things do have their place, I also feel like, what else are you doing besides that? Because and I hold myself to that too. Like I am always sitting and going, is this enough? What can I do? What do I have the bandwidth to do today? What more can I do? Am I just doing this for show? Am I actually putting my money where my mouth is? And that's where, like, for me, this past year, I didn't know if I wanted to keep going to Catalyst, because for me, I've reached a point in my career where I'm like, is this still a viable thing for me? Is this somewhere where I'm going to be getting connections that work for me? Or is it just fun for me to go, which is great. It is a lot of fun. I get to see a lot of people I know. I enjoy it, but is it helping me career wise? And then I stopped and I said, it's not just about that anymore. It's about me helping to keep building this thing that helped me so much. Help it help other people, and help it help other people of color, because I don't have a degree. I didn't go to college. I started doing sex ed because I randomly read a bunch of shit and I know a bunch of random things, and that's me. And I started talking about sex on Twitter and writing erotica, and I had a blog, and I wanted to do something, and I decided on doing the show, Sex Ed a Go-Go. And every year I went to Catalyst, I left with more tools. I left with more materials to build what my dream. And then I got there, and then to be able to bring that back to the place where it incubated and entertain people and help people enter into the con weekend on a note, like a happy note, and meeting people and like learning a little bit about the conference and having a good time. And I want to keep doing that because as like a beacon. I don't know if you know Kate McCombs. She talks a lot about being a beacon of permission.
No. Mm-mm.
So one of her main things is you living your life and you living your light by going out and just being who we are. A lot of times we don't realize that we're giving other people permission to do what they do. And I've based pretty much my entire career on being that beacon of permission, that I will talk about my sex life, because some people might think it's crass, but when I put sexy photos of myself online, one, I'm doing it because I like the way I look, and two, I want to share it. But three, there's somebody sitting at home with a similar body to mine who's going to go, oh, look at her. I can do that. Where'd she buy that? I can do that. Or being a woman of color and queer, and the fact that I have had a lot of success in my show and my speaking and my sex ed, and that I'm still working really hard in it. So if I can keep showing up to this and helping build it up and making it a space that is more than just saying it's welcome and diverse, that it actually is, then that's what I'm going to do. So that's my new mission, is to keep helping this con be more than it can be, than it is now, like to keep on that upward tick and bringing in more and more people of color. So it won't be this con where people are like, oh, well, is it very white? You know, or is it very cis? Like, I want it to keep getting better. And that's part of my action for this year.
So that's like it sounds like a big why for you, like connecting to that purpose and that's what's driving it forward.
Very much so.
Yeah. So Dirty Lola is a storyteller, edutainer, sex educator, and sex toy peddler. She is also the creator and host of the live sex Q&A and variety show and podcast, Sex Ed A Go-Go. Where is that show? Is it on YouTube or?
It is a live show that happens in New York once a month.
Got it.
We only have 2 more, and then it's a podcast as well. We re-air the live shows as podcasts. Okay,
so during the last 6 years, Dirty Lola has shared her distinctive brand of kick-ass body and sex positivity and her personal journey into the kink and polyamorous lifestyles with the masses on and off stage. Lola has taken Sex Ed A Go-Go across the country, from New York City to Los Angeles and beyond. Oh, girl, please let me know when the next show is. I so want to come and check it out.
It's September 30th.
Ooh, okay. I'm going to put it in my calendar. We'll have to make sure we include a link here in the show notes. She has presented various conferences and expos such as Catalyst Con and Woodhull, the Sex Expo and AVN, and during Sex Week at Brew College, Hofstra University, and the University of New Mexico. When she's not hosting Sex A Go-Go or teaching folks about pleasure, kink, polyamory, and sex positivity, you can find her behind the counter at Shag, a sex shop in Brooklyn. So, Dirty Lola, how can people find you online?
You can find me on Twitter, at Dirty Lola, also at Sex Ed A Go-Go. I'm on Instagram, also at Dirty Lola. And those are my 2 main platforms. Okay, great. And then if people want to contact you to learn more about what you do or to work with you or hire you? You can check out sexedagogo.com. So I have a link on that to where you can find more about me and all my email information and things like that. Great. Okay, perfect. And then is there anything specific that you're working on, or are there any, you've got a Sex Ed A Go-Go show coming up on September 30th. What are the details for that? So September 30th and October 28th are our last 2 shows of the season, and then we're going to go on hiatus for a little bit while I work on some other projects. Okay. So both of those shows are at Otto Shrunken Head on the Lower East Side, and the doors are at 6, show starts at 6:30. It's a good time. It's a little dive bar. Nice. It's a tiki room dive bar, and we're in the back room, so it's private, but folks come in, they ask us questions. Everybody, it's anonymous. You get to write them down. It's fun. It's like comedy because it's a little bit funny. We also do go-go dancing in between. So it's a good night. So you can come in and learn something about sex, get some questions answered about love, sex, and relationships, and then enjoy a nice go-go show. Ooh, awesome. And anything else you want to share with our audience before we say sayonara for now? That's about all I'm working on now that I have all the details for. Cool. Okay, awesome. So, Dirty Lola, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to have you on. And I'm just grateful to know you and grateful to know that we're both in Brooklyn. Holler. Thank you. Yeah. So I got to come check you at Shag and definitely come see a show soon. Ignite Intimacy Community. You heard it here first. Dirty Lola checking us and filling us in, giving us some really great insights and just some powers so that we can move forward and have more consciousness around how we show up in the world and who we be and how to really truly create more diversity and inclusion, definitely in these realms of sex and sexuality and sex education and conferences, events, and other things. So thank you for joining us for this powerful conversation. You can check out
Dirty Lola, at Dirty Lola, or at Sexagogo. And we look forward to checking you on the next one. All right. Stay blessed and ciao for now.
Give thanks for tuning in to another conversation on the Ignite Intimacy podcast hotline. We love that you choose to spend your time with us. Check us out online at igniteintimacy.com and subscribe to us on iTunes. Also, tell your friends all about it. This beautiful music was arranged by Jason Pfaff and Mike Corey, and this podcast is produced by yours truly, Miss La. Give thanks again, and we'll see you on the next one. In the meantime, let your light shine bright and ignite your intimacy.